Hey everyone, welcome back to the shed. Today I'm going to kind of go over what I've been working on since the last update, which was like a month ago, or yeah, I guess about a month ago, but I've done a ton of work and it's all little things that make it look like nothing else has been done. Yeah, there's a bunch of little stuff, which is super exciting because I think it's at the point where we can try and start it. Hopefully, maybe. I think we're at the point where I can dump some fresh gas in that tank and we'll hook up some wires and see if it either catches fire or runs. Either way, probably exciting. So let's get after it. So first thing I did is, first I've rebuilt both of these turbos just with cheapy Amazon kits. Both of them just had a worn out thrust bearing. I did a little time lapse, so I'll throw that in here of just taking these apart, putting them back together. I know people say you're supposed to balance them. I just mark the shafts, take them apart, put them back together with the marks lining up. These were free and the rebuild kit was like 30 bucks. So I'm not going to lose too much sleep over it. If they fly apart, they fly apart. But I took some of the original hard lines and you can't see this one, but I welded some steel AN fittings to them and then some flex hoses down to this little pressure test manifold, or I guess oil distribution block thing, whatever you want to call it. So the feed in here and then two oil lines here. It's hard to get the camera and the fingers in. Yeah, one to each turbo, and then I've got a gauge here. Yeah, the turbos are bolted on for good now. Haven't done anything with the exhaust, but there's feeds and drains. I mean, technically that's all the turbo really needs. The coolant lines would be nice to hook up eventually, but we'll see if I have space or time or room or concern for doing that. But yeah, so far turbos are ready to go. I've already primed the motor, take the timing belt cover off, spin the auxiliary shaft which drives the oil pump, and I pumped oil up, took the lines off, made sure I had oil to both of the turbos, put them back on, made sure I had oil pressure. And it's like 60 something pounds just spinning it with a drill, so I think that's good to go. Moving on to something near the turbos, the strut tops. I've kind of boxed those in. My non-engineer brain had to talk to people that are smarter than me, and we've kind of got this one coming up here welded into this band, and then this plate down tying into the down tubes on both sides to hopefully take some of that load that would push these up, because this is now under tension, I guess. And then I think I still am going to make like some kind of a strut top between the two to kind of help strengthen it up even more, but I'll make that removable so you can get that thing out when it inevitably explodes, which will almost certainly happen. But hopefully those stay in place. It's kind of hard to see with all this mess in here, but I actually did build more kind of floor and like a firewall and trans tunnel kind of framework, I guess you could call it. Just kind of making it up as I go, but yeah, like you have to build something to attach all this other stuff to. So I think the computers are going to live there. The fuse panel and stuff will be here. I bought a little Amazon heater, which is going to kind of live under here, and then I'll have a few ducts going up to defrost if I do put a window in it, or just keep your toes, you know, from getting too cold. And also a spot to mount my brake master and throttle pedal and the lower steering column support, all that kind of fun stuff. So yeah, it's just 3/4 inch box tube, pretty much as light as I could get away with while still being somewhat structurally sound. So I think there'll be like a cowl over this kind of whole thing eventually, but that's not going to stop me from taking it for a test drive with nothing on it. That should be fun. Yeah, and kind of on that note, I have a stock 240 master cylinder set up here, and actually most of my brake lines plumbed. They do go down into, let's see if I can get a shot here, that stock, well, junction block. I definitely cannot get a shot there. There's the stock junction block kind of there, so those feed in. There's no booster anymore. I deleted it, and after doing a bunch of digging on the internet, kind of came up with a few things to try. Pedal ratio seemed to be the thing that everyone was talking about, so I've actually moved the push rod point up to change the ratio, and I think they say like 6:1 if you've got manual brakes. I shortened the pedal here too, just because it was way too long and like you were pushing it with your heel. Now it's kind of your toe. So it's about 12 inches there of total length, and then 2 inches here. It's somewhere around 6:1 ratio, so it shouldn't feel too hard when you push on the brakes, but we'll see. I might have to change that, but there's literally like no room for a booster here, and I was thinking about remote mounting the whole thing and having a long push rod and booster down here, and I'm not doing that. So it gets manual brakes for now. Brake lines kind of run, let's see here, along the chassis rail here. I'm gonna make some brackets to support it, but I just wanted to get them all kind of in place, and then come up here. They go up to, I've got a proportioning valve so I can slack the brakes off for burnouts or turn it up for when I actually want to stop, and then splits, and then goes to each of the 3 calipers here. Oh god, don't die, Trevor. Yeah, just a little bracket there, and then the soft line, so this should have some flex when this cycles. Yeah, so I just have to do front brake lines, because those are Bluetooth at the moment, and then I can bleed the brakes, so stopping is cool if you're into that sort of thing. Another thing I did on the firewall was obviously have a working gas pedal, so that's kind of cool. That's just a stock 240 throttle pedal, stock 240 throttle cable. That's the K-Jet intake that I've modified and added the injectors on, because this would have had mechanical injection and the fuel injectors would have been in the head. And then it has a 960 throttle body underneath, and that was an absolute pain because I had to swap the TPS sensor from a 240, adapt it onto the 960 throttle body. There was no room down there, so I actually had to pot the sensor and make a little flying lead pigtail for it. And then let's see here, oh, there it is. Yeah, I added like a Deutsch connector, and then that's now my TPS connection, because there was no room to get the plug on underneath the intake there. And then figure out the throttle cable spool and the kickdown spool. It's not finished, but there's, you know, full throttle, and then the last little bit, that's your kickdown, because automatic transmission things. So that was a bit of playing around, but it all works now. You get full throttle, and it has a working TPS and a working kickdown. So I'm going to call that part done for now. So like I said in the last video, and you can probably guess, the radiator is going in the back of this thing. So I'm going to try and use the stock Volvo water pump to see if it has enough push. And I know, before anyone says, it probably doesn't. So I'm planning on, you know, everyone's like, oh, BMW or Davis Craig or Corvette or what all these inline water pumps you can add. I've got lots of room here to add one to help that thing out. But I want to try it and just see what it does. If it doesn't work at all, it'll probably run fine for 20 minutes and then overheat, and then I'll have to take it apart and put a water pump in. But whatever. Great, then at least I tried. But I did put a smaller water pump pulley on it. I think that's from like a 940. So in theory, that's smaller, so it should spin faster. I had to modify the inlet of it because it was rubber hose right to here, and obviously this part gets very burny. And any guy that's put an aftermarket header on a redblock probably has issues with burning radiator hoses on this side. So I just welded some 1.5" tube on to move it away from the hot burny part. And then it's just 1.5" tube all the way across and down. It'll go, I'll have to do some little offsetting here to go under the floorboards. And then it'll carry along there, up through the back here, kind of left some spot here. So it's, there probably will be some kind of a firewall thing happening here. So I want it on that side. And then up into the rad, inlet, outlet, back around. So, oh, the other thing I did is because the rad is up high here, that's going to be no issue to get the air out, but you've got all this low line tube, and then it obviously comes up into here. You have the heater hose connections on the back, which will help get a little bit of air out, but I also added a little port here on the high point of the thermostat, and I'll put I can put a little like a bleed valve or something in here to help when I'm filling it to bleed all the air out of the whole thing, because I know airlocks will be an issue with this kind of setup. So trying to think ahead a little bit. Maybe I'm smart. Maybe I just added a bunch of work for myself. I don't know. Gave me some TIG welding practice though. It's still not great, but it shouldn't leak. So yeah, that's where the coolant setup's at right now. I also finished off the rear spring mounts. So those are all finished welded now. Added some more strength. I still might add some more. I've just kind of gone crazy with gussets because I know there's going to be a lot of force on these. So there's more gussets back here, more braces. I still might, you know, tie something in here. And you can see here my shock mounts. So the rear fuel tank, that's just from a 240. So I added these rails to kind of pick it up where the stock 240, it actually hangs in a stock 240. Now it's sitting. But then that also worked out well for my upper shock mounts, which I've made adjustable just because I could, and I have a plasma and a drill, so why wouldn't you? So those should be plenty strong. That kind of ties everything in the back together, and that worked out pretty well. These shocks, they're off some motorcycle, and I sat this thing on the ground again, and it's still way too soft. And looking into it more, these are just stock 240 springs, and the rate's just way too soft. Because we have this big lever, essentially, it's making these softer than if they were in the solid axle setup in a 240. So I think I need like BMW or something else, because they kind of have the same setup, or like a Jeep Cherokee, like something with some stiffer springs, because you know this just ain't working. So I'm gonna keep playing around with that, but that's a minor detail at this point. I mean, who needs rear suspension? You want it to be all squatted anyways, right? Like I said, a stock 240 rear fuel tank, stock 240 high pressure pump, and then there's the stock 240 low pressure pump in there, because like I said, they have that nice little surge tank baffle thing in them. They work really well. So that's just chilling down there, just on this rubber mounted bracket that they come with, which is nice. It's all a new one. So yeah, so it the lift pump pushes out on the big line here into the high pressure pump down there. Then from the high pressure pump, I've got some injection hose, fuel injection rated hose, all the way up to the fuel rail in the back, and then out of the fuel rail into the regulator, and then out of the regulator back to the tank. And yeah, that seems to all work pretty well. So I'm gonna call that done. I'm gonna make sure that all those lines are, you know, protected and strapped, and because they are just rubber. I thought about doing AN lines, but like, this is a cheap project, and you know, I'm not gonna spend $1 million on stainless braided lines. It's injection rated hose for like 200 psi, so I'm not gonna worry too much about it. As long as nothing cuts it, it should be good. Kind of struggled with battery placement for a while. At first I kind of thought behind here, or like under the tank, or you know, behind one of the seats, and I kind of settled on here just because it's central and it's kind of protected. It's technically right next to you, but the seats are kind of here, so it's behind you. So I built this kind of fancy steel box that picks up on a bunch of spots, so it ties in the battery box, gives you a spot for my master disconnect and my main fuse, because I like to have those. You know, if stuff goes wrong, shut that off. It kills power to the whole thing, because it doesn't take very long for a car battery to turn all of these into glowing hot melty wires. And then it also gave me a spot for one of my harness mounting spots, so that's going to be like for the lap belt portion of the harness. So trying to make things that do multiple things. Engineers are really good at that. I am not, but I'm learning. So yeah, and then, you know, it kind of looks kind of angly. Rather, it could have just been a square piece, but you know, try and make it at least look like I made an effort. So yeah, that's all done. Playing with the shifter too. I've kind of got like a linkage kind of going on there. So, oh, it fell off. That's not ideal. The pin fell out. But anyways, shorten this rod here, and then had to extend this rod here so that I can hit my camera. And then yeah, playing with the linkage is a pain, because I've run into this with throttle cables, clutch throwouts, shifter stuff. Anytime you move stuff and change the angles that stuff operates at, it's all wrong. So now this doesn't go through the detents on the transmission properly, so I have to cut and weld and try like 7 different arm and like hole combinations to get the throw between all the gears right, and just don't, you know, put this where it should have been, which was down flat. But I'm committed now, so I'm gonna work through it. But, or maybe I'll just put some kind of like a ratchet cable, B&M or something in it, because those are way more adjustable. But it'd be kind of cool to use the stock one. But it goes in park and drive and neutral as it is, so that's all I need for the first test drive. Probably the last thing I'll go over before I try and start it, and I promise we're gonna try and start it because it's ready. The wiring, I've got this is just a little Miata battery because it's small, and I think it's still about 500 cranking amps. So I've got positive goes through the disconnect in my fuse, negative just grounds on the frame. And then off of here, I've got that's my starter feed. And then I've also got, these are the constant powers for the LH 2.4 computers. And then I've also got these 2 fuses. This is all temporary, so don't get too upset about it. This is coil power, and then this is ECU power, and then just a couple switches, so that's how you turn all that on, and then just jump the starter out with a line. So yeah, that's all, like I said, super temporary, but I wanted to try and get it at least where I think it's gonna live. It'll be inside the car, so kind of away from getting damaged. And then yeah, as far as hooking up the ECU, that was actually really easy. LH 2.4, like I said, I'm using a 240 harness, which is all standalone, so when you pull it out of a 240, you've got your fuel pump relay and your spark and fuel ECUs, and then you have this bundle, and you literally need like 4 to make it work. The 2 big heavy red ones are constant power. That is 12 volt fuel pump out to run the fuel pumps, so it only runs when it senses the motor turning. And then this little blue one is to turn the ECU on to power everything up. And then you have to run another power up to your coil, but that's pretty easy. So yeah, there's a bunch of other ones here: heated O2, check engine, fast style, speedo, but you don't need those to make it run. They just help it run better. So that's where we're at. So, kind of going over all that with you guys, I think the only logical step next is to dump 10 liters of 91 in it, set the fuel pressure, because I haven't done that yet, and then see if it starts. Obviously there's no coolant in it, so we're not going to be able to run it for very long, but I don't even know if that motor runs. It came out of a car that was not running, and I don't know why it stopped. So hopefully it's not the motor. It made oil pressure. So yeah, nothing for it but to add some gas, hit some switches, and see what it does. Oh, off. Way too much.
I'm just going to screw this all the way in. I think the plunger's stuck. It is a quality part. Okay, on. That's better. Okay. That's it. 43 and a half. Okay, on again. No leaks.
All right, well, try and start it. So we set the fuel pressure, and if I've done this right, we should go through a fuel pump prime when I turn on the ECU. Then we can turn on the coil. Then I can jump the starter solenoid and see if it goes. So let's see. Yeah, there's prime.
All right, here goes nothing.
Well, okay.
Well, that's a good sign. There's like half of it now hooked up. I'm surprised it runs this well. All right, again. Fuel pump, coil, contact. As you can probably tell, I'm super stoked that that worked as well as it did. Literally, that was the first attempt at trying to start it. Literally just dumped some gas in it, hit the key, it made all those noises that you heard, and then it ran. So, I mean, I bought the motor for this came out of a car I bought for $300 for the whole car that was rusted out, and it was last insured in 2013. So I think this thing hasn't run for 10 years. And before everyone's like, oh, you're revving it like crazy, like it's cold. I'm like, well, it has no water in it, so it's not going to take long to get hot. And also, it's worth $50. It's just the stock NA red block. They're just nothing. And, you know, I only ran it for a minute or two. So, you know, if and when it blows up, which it will, then I do have plans to build a nice forged red block for it. I have all the parts sitting there, but I mean, why am I going to put a bunch of time into a forged motor that I don't even know if this setup's going to work? So we'll try it on this low boost. We'll inevitably want to go faster, and we'll keep turning the boost up, and inevitably it will throw a rod out the side of the block, and then we'll build a new one. But for now, that gets me more motivation because I know it runs now. Coolant lines, finish the brakes, figure out the suspension stuff, a little bit more welding, and intercooler stuff. Obviously it's running NA right now. I just have the MAF hooked up to the intake. The turbos aren't doing anything except making noise. So we'll do intercooler piping. We'll have the MAF over here, and then it will actually be boosted. And then, yeah, it's ready for a rip. So there will be burnouts, I promise. And I'm just curious to see how it drives, and put some time into a proper exhaust too. It sounds cool, but it's weird. And I knew it would be weird, but I think I can make it sound better. So I'm going to do like a proper 2-into-1 and try and clean up the noise a little bit, because, you know, it's something different, but, you know, it kind of sounds like a weed whacker or something, but it doesn't sound like a tractor, so that's cool. But yeah, I think that is it for this episode. Yeah, if you like it, subscribe. I'm going to keep doing updates whenever. I've been going pretty hard on this thing, but the next one hopefully will be at driving down the road or racetrack. So yeah, until then, have a good one. See you next time.